Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on marching up to freedom land.
My warmest greetings to all the young and young at heart participants of the Girl Rising International Day of the Girls Summit, and I wish you all an empowering International Day of the Girl. As we grapple with the unprecedented crisis brought by COVID-19, the stakes regarding women empowerment are higher, and the contexts have radically changed. Our task has intensified to find and reach out to the last, the least, and the lost of our sisters, to empower and inspire them so that they may do the same for others. This is our vision and is the blueprint for our better normal. A world where women and girls from all walks of life are given the chance to succeed, to thrive, and to lead. Because when you empower one girl, she will not just rise, she herself will raise others with her. And so I urge the young women and girls in this summit, keep doing what you do. Keep serving your communities. Keep raising others with you. If we are to solve the world's most pressing problems, we need young people to be engaged, given pathways to contribute to society, and empowered. We need more innovators, trailblazers, and change makers, especially young women and girls like you. No step is too small. The women who came before us proved that, and the girls helping change the world now continue to prove it. The large strides and monumental achievements of our foremothers in the fight for suffrage, for civil rights, for our place in society, were won through everyday grit, the daily tasks that exhibit compassion, determination, and courage. These were small steps made constantly and in solidarity. These were steps that might have felt too small to matter at the moment, but made all the difference in the end. Today we are called to move in lockstep, together as we face the biggest challenge of our times, a challenge I am ready and eager to face with you. I am one with you and all the young women and girls around the world working for a fairer, more dignified, and truly equitable world. I am hopeful, I am determined, I too am girl rising. Thank you very much. Mabuhay kayo.
Hi, my name is Malati. I'm 19 years old. My pronouns are she and hers. When I started my activism journey, I was 12 years old. I grew up here on the beautiful island of Bali, Indonesia. But at the time, being 10 and 12 years old, my younger sister being 10, Isabel, we started seeing a problem around us, and that was plastic pollution. It was everywhere. And we turned to each other and said, what can we do about it? We don't want to wait until we're older. We want to start right now. And so, 10 and 12 years old, we thought the simple action that we could do was say bye-bye to plastic bags. And that's where we started our first NGO to make our island home of Bali plastic bag free. We encountered many challenges. It's been now almost a 7-year-long campaign. And one of the things that we have encountered is many questions and stares being like, you are girls. You shouldn't be out here on the front lines. You should study, be polite, don't raise your voice. And this just powered us even more because we were lucky enough to be raised in a household that didn't create boundaries because of gender. We were privileged enough to have parents that challenged us to make mistakes, to go out there and to follow our heart. And now we're fueled to help empower more women, empower more girls. Because when we empower girls, we empower a future we're heading towards something that we're proud of. We're raising better economies. We're protecting the environment. This goes hand in hand if we give girls and women the same opportunities. And this is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. I think girls all around the world, especially within our Bioplastic Bags team, 50 teams around the world in 29 countries, almost 98% are led by girls. So you see, all you have to do is take the first step, lead by example, be brave enough. Yes, raise your voice a little bit, raise your neck, but lead from a place of compassion and wisdom. And you will see, you will start creating this momentum that is undeniable and unstoppable. I am Girl Rising.
It was always hottest before the rains came. Sometimes, even my daydreams seemed ready to burst, blistering beneath the city's crushing heat. And I remember how my mother's eyes would shine when my father talked about moving back to the village one day. In the city, she used to say, life rushes through the streets like 1,000 rivers. But in the village, there's only one river, and it's real, with cool waters flowing beside mango trees full of parrots. I would love to live beside the cool river and eat free mangoes all day. But I was so far from that river. I was born here, in the city, in our house on the sidewalk. My mother had her parrots in the village. In the city, I had my own friends.
রুকসানা, এদিকে আসো, খাতাটা নিয়ে আসো। ছবি আঁকা, অঙ্কের ক্লাসে ছবি আঁকা, মজা করছো? বেরিয়ে যাও। তোমরা পড়তে থাকো।
No more trouble. That's what my father said last time. And I promised, no more. But somehow, trouble always found me.
দিদি বাবা ডাকছে।
চল। দাঁড়া দাদা, দাদা ওই যে রং পেন্সিল হয় না, ছবি আঁকে যে। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ,
দেখুন এরকম দেখতে পাবেন, এটা এরকম কানেক্টর পেন দেখতে পাবেন।
দেখ কোনটা নিবি?
এইটা
খাতা?
আর খাতা এইটা।
দাদা এই দুটো কত দাম? 30। নে চল। আমি কত কষ্ট করে তোদের পড়াশোনা করাই যাতে তোরা বড় হয়ে মানুষের মতো মানুষ হতে পারিস। ছবি আঁকার জন্য তো পাঠাই না বল। এর আগে কতগুলো অঙ্কের খাতা তুই নষ্ট করেছিস বলতো?
আর করব না বাবা, এখন আমি ড্রয়িং খাতায় ড্রয়িং করব আর মন দিয়ে পড়াশোনা করব। আমি তোমার কথা দিচ্ছি বাবা।
That was the happiest day of my life. After that, I would have promised my father anything. Some days, there wasn't even enough money for food. But today, there was a notebook, colored pens, no punishment. Had there ever been a girl as lucky as me? I remember thinking that one day I would take my mother and my father and my sisters in an aeroplane. We would fly high above the city and the countryside and see every part of Earth. After we landed, we wouldn't live on the street anymore. We would live in a big house by the river in the village. And everyone would have their own bed. And my father would have many cows. And my mother would have her parrots. And I would have a monkey who I'd call Masti. And I'd teach him to do all my math.
এই দাঁড়া, কি খুকি কি করছো একা বসে? আচ্ছা দেখি। আরে আমরা কিছু করবো, এত ভয় পাচ্ছ কেন? আমরা কিছু করবো না। কোথায় কোথায় শোনো, আমরা বন্ধু, তোমার কিচ্ছু হবে না, খেলবো আমরা একসঙ্গে। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, কি খেলতে ভালোবাসো? বাবাকে কেন ডাকছো? আরে আমরা কিচ্ছু করবো, আমরা কিছু করবো নাকি?
কালী গ্রামে ফিরে যাব আমরা।
না, আমি ফিরে যাব না। দেখো, এত দূরে এসে ওদের স্কুলে ভর্তি করেছি যাতে ওরা মানুষের মতো মানুষ হতে পারে। আমি ফিরে যাব না।
স্কুলে মেয়েরা পড়তে যাবে আর শহরের নেকড়েগুলো ওদের ছিঁড়ে খাবে।
দেখো, এত দূরে এসে ওদের স্কুলে ভর্তি করেছে, ওরা তো ভালো পড়াশোনা করছে, প্রত্যেকদিন স্কুলে যাচ্ছে। না, আমি ফিরে যাব না।
After that, my sisters and I spent our nights at a shelter. My father said it wasn't safe for us to be on the streets after dark.
কি করছো কি তুমি? কি ভেবেছো কি? এই সন্ধ্যাবেলা মেম সাহেবদের মতো 9 সেন্ট্রাল খোলা হয়েছে এই জন্য টিভি দেখার জন্য? যাও কাজ করো কি যাও। যাও তোমরা সব কাজ করো কি যাও। যত সব।
How could so much beauty and so much meanness be together in one world? Where was that magic place inside the television and inside my head? And why was I stuck here instead? Maybe I was being punished after all. After that long, terrible night, the monsoon rains came. My favorite time of the year. But this time, the rains came with more tears. A thousand rivers flowing with life, and us adrift. No place in the soaking world for roots to take hold. Everyone was crying. Even my drawings.
তুমি ঠিকই বলেছিলে। চলো আমরা ফিরে যাই।
না, তুমিই ঠিক বলেছিলে। আমরা এত দূরে কষ্ট করে এলাম, ওরা তাড়িয়ে দিলে চলে যাব?
Even after all that, still, we were together. A family. I felt in my heart that everything would be okay. My friends were still there. That's when I learned to never give up. Because after the rain, there's always sunshine.
Welcome. I'm so happy to be here today with Joy Lekaktanashol, the CEO and founder of Edwings, one of our program partners in Thailand. And I'd like to just start, Joy, by asking you a little bit about Edwings. What do you do and what is your mission?
Yeah, Edwing Educations is an impact-driven platform where young adults who has passionate in changing Thai education together. And we aiming to one dream, one mission that we have to make millions of our students live better. We aim to transform their learns, how they learn and explore and also unleash their true potential and become competitive human capitals with the belief that we can combine data, we can combine passions, and we can combine technology together to make it happen. So I see that the need is education must be a tool to give hope to people, to children, to family that they're going to have better living. They're going to have a dream and they have capability to define their own destiny and seek out that dream. Education should be a tool to tell them that they will not born in the social class that they're going to die into that. It's going to be a tool for them to bring back the hope for a family. And one key that I see is in every society, they have inequality, they have social class, they have people who have poor resources or rich of resources. But one dream that every family has, every parents has is they want the best for their kid. But that is the thing that I believe that there needs something to happen differently in our nation. And I would like to be part of that. And I'm very lucky that I find a lot of young adults who see the same and correct actions to do some things that try to making change to our nation.
Well, it's congratulations on founding a very important organization that clearly is serving a need. And it's a perfect segue into what I'd like to talk to you about next. What you've described, a child needing to be free to dream his or her dream, is exactly the story of one of the Girl Rising films that tells the story of Roxana, a young girl from India, who dreams of being an artist, and clearly in her education system, in her class, she is drilled on also things that are important, math and multiplication tables, but really her dream is to be an artist. Can you tell me how you use Roxana's film in your programming and with kids and teachers?
Yeah, with the story that we got is from Girl Risings, I think it's very impactful to our girls in school that we implemented this project, because it's once in a lifetime that our student, especially for the girl, they see lesson in action. They see the themes as a story. Is life is something out of the book. Is something that is not in lesson. It's something that they cannot only see, learn, but they feel it. It's like bring up hope from one little story of a girl who's not giving up. Even they've been in a very poor environment, the environments that telling her to give up every single day. I think that the key things of this part is not only a girl who can see the powerful and impact from the story, but the boy as well. To see how struggle it is of women or a girl who facing all this part. And I think that is likely change in our children's eye and belief. And one thing that's very important that I see, they see it as a story that reflecting to them that, oh, I'm not alone. In this social society, I have someone facing the same problem, even maybe worse than what they are facing now. But they have support system. They have thinking, they have power to dream. That is the thing that I think is very wake up the eyes of our children. I think this is very important. Not only seeing the life example lessons of how Roxana interact to themselves, but interact to the external environments, the things that come to impact her and how her response into that. I think this is a great example. Surprisingly, that it's not only a girl that finds it's impactful, a boy as well. I think this is a very good example.
Wonderful. Well, I thank you so much. Again, it is our honor to partner with you. You've grown an extraordinary organization. And I know these are challenging times for everyone that is in education around the world. So we wish you the very best confronting the challenges of this year. And thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you to you as well.
Welcome to Planet Girl Rising, a panel discussion on girls, climate change, and environmental protection. I am Pia Mancini, a Girl Rising Young Leaders Task Force member and a co-moderator. To the Girl Rising community, thank you for your inspiration. Your work and passion have brought us all here today. I'm honored to be here alongside Christina Lowry, leader of Girl Rising, and our special guest for this essential take on girls' education and environment. Today, we are speaking to 3 highly respected leaders in girls' education and environmental protection. I want to give a very warm welcome to Christina Kwok, Fellow in the Center for Universal Education and Associate Director of the Climate Education Partnership Project, and Duma Ling, Managing Trustee of Masungai Geo Reserve, National Geographic Young Explorer, and World Economic Forum Global Shaper. And lastly, Ralin Tisana-san, who is also called Lily, an environmental activist and leader of campaigns on climate change and plastic pollutions. You can find their full and very impressive bios in our event program on the Girl Rising website.
Thank you, Pia, and welcome to Christina, Anne, and Lily. The world's attention has been focused on the global health crisis that we are all living through. And it's creating fear, deep economic uncertainty, and a host of ripple effects that are affecting women and girls in unique ways. But there is another global crisis that has been far longer in the making and potentially more calamitous for us as human beings. And that is climate change and environmental degradation. Which also, the fallout of which has disproportionate and serious impacts on women and girls. And yet there is a growing understanding and a mounting body of evidence that educating and empowering girls is directly connected to addressing climate change and the effects of climate change. Girl Rising is digging into a new film and campaign on this topic. And so we're thrilled to have all of you here today to discuss. You each are leading efforts in this realm. So I'd love to just start by asking you, what inspired you to begin this work? And Christina, why don't we start with you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me be a part of this really esteemed panel. I'm super excited, very excited to be with you all today at Girl Rising. So for me, you know, I do work on girls' education, and some of the work that I've been doing on research, through research on girls' education really pointed to the many ripple effects that an investment in girls' education can have with regard to improving her own life outcomes, improving the outcomes of her family and her community and her country. And so as I was doing this research, I had a mentor who said, hey, you know what, there's some interesting things going on in the climate change world. Take a look at that. What's going on there? And so I began to do some research, just some very preliminary research, and found that there were just, as you said, Christina, a disproportionately negative impact of climate change on girls and women. And this just opened my eyes to a story that we hadn't been paying attention to. Not only did the data show that girls and women have lower life expectancy in the face of natural disasters, but if they survived, they're susceptible to human trafficking and sexual assault and overcrowded shelters. When you look at gradual or protracted climate crises like drought, girls who are already facing a whole set of gender-related challenges under normal circumstances are then put even more at risk, and their vulnerabilities increased in protracted crises. So not only are they more susceptible to being pulled out of school to attend to household responsibilities that now require more time because the environmental circumstances have changed, but they're also more susceptible to early and forced child marriage as households turn towards the dowry that could bring in extra income through marriage that would then ease household financial burdens, right? So in short, what I found through this research on climate change's impact on girls was that families were turning to short-term coping responses to climate change that had, unfortunately, long-term consequences for the girl child. So, these coping mechanisms are directing resources away from educational opportunities that could otherwise really change the course of girls' futures, and instead are forcing them to stay in existing conditions of poverty, vulnerability, and marginalization that perpetuate girls and women's positions at the bottom of the pyramid. So, while there was some clear research on the negative impacts of climate change on girls, we weren't talking about, the positive impacts that my other research was looking at in terms of, the ripple-on effects of girls' education. We weren't talking about how an investment in girls' education could strengthen our collective response to climate change. And so since realizing that, the rest has been history. I've been spending the last 4 years of my research really looking at the interlinkages between girls' education and climate change.
Thanks so much, Christina. And we'll get back to some of that evidence and data a little bit later in the conversation. Anne, what about you? What inspired you to begin this work?
I guess it would be, will I have to start with a description of the work that I do? Or can I just carry on?
Sure. We'd love to hear a little bit. We do have everyone's bios, and I encourage everybody to go to the links on the website for people's bios and descriptions, but we'd love to hear a little bit about what you do and then what inspires you.
Right. All right. So what I'm doing is, basically I am doing conservation and sustainable development on a karst ecosystem, on a karst landscape in an area about an hour and a half away from the capital of Metro Manila here in the Philippines. And I guess my story really comes from something very personal. The roots of it all come from something very personal. The conservation work that we've been doing here in this area actually started more than 2 decades ago in 1996, when my dad took on that ambitious role of reforesting and sustainably developing the area. And I was around 6 years old at that time. So I really grew up going through the place during the weekends and the holidays. And it certainly felt like I was dealing with a little brother of sorts, watching it grow, go through its challenges, and develop and change through time. It really felt like I was growing old with the place. And we just had this realization, my sister and I, one day, that a lot of the mountains that we used to see in the distance were no longer there. And it's literally our little brother mountain that's going to be up next for quarrying or any other destructive form of development. And because of that realization, we decided that we had to do more. We wanted the place to be more sustainably done. We can't be doling out on its restoration and conservation forever. It has to be financially sound and sustainable. We also realized that there needs to be more people who believe in what the place really has to offer in order to give it a fighting chance. It can't just be our small group of 10, 20 people who've known of the place for a very long time, rallying for its protection. And so basically, about 1.5 years after I graduated from university, I worked out on how we can pursue that. Basically chased after a lot of scientists, made the pitch deck to UNESCO, flew all the way to Paris just to run through the pitch deck and put together a geotourism concept and destination. And basically on the same year, we launched Misumi Geo-Reserve. That was in 2015. And it was very well received. We had we were fully booked for about 3 months after launching the geotourism component. And the challenges didn't end there, though. There were lots of land trafficking and interest in the area that occurred after the tourism initiative was launched. And so we just realized that it's just going to be a regular struggle that we will have to deal with. It doesn't end at any point in time. It's a continuing struggle to conserve the place and to really make sure that it survives. In 2017, we entered into an agreement with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. It was then led by this groundbreaking, amazing environmentalist who's also a woman, also a girl. Her name's Gina Lopez. And basically, she tasked us to conserve an area 7 times more than the initial area that we were conserving, using the money that we've raised through tourism in the last 2-3 years. So it's a very ambitious goal. It's been a very exciting ride. Lots of challenges, but always, always worth it. And today we have about 80 forest rangers engaged full-time in the conservation work. Our operations are now fully supported by the geotourism activities that we've done. Yes, COVID has hit us. We haven't been doing tourism in the last 6 months, but we're fortunate enough to have saved enough not to lay off anyone and to continue the work that we're doing. We've had more than 50,000 visitors since the launch date, over 200 different corporate partners and different school partners in education. Right now, we have 5 ranger stations in the threatened area, which we are aiming to restore, over 12 kilometers of monitoring trails, and 52,000 plus trees planted and continuously nurtured. So yeah, there's still a lot of things to do, but looking back, I guess it's somewhat good progress somehow. And what really keeps me wanting to do more is just seeing the impact and opportunity that goes with the work that we're doing. The Philippines is one of the mega diverse countries of the world. It's 1 out of 17 that hosts a good chunk of the Earth's biodiversity. And that's not even something that we're showcasing and building on. I believe that geotourism, the form of sustainable development that we're doing, helps and contributes pursue that, in pursuing that direction. And so I wish to be able to continue that for our area and for many more areas in the years to come.
Wow, well, that's amazing and so inspiring. It sounds like you have more than one little brother now.
I'm gonna have a family.
Family.
A family of different landscapes.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you. And Lily, what about you? What inspired you to begin your work?
So first of all, I'd like to thank you, all of you, for allowing me to come and speak at such an amazing event here today. And I think what inspired me to start doing my environmental activism was the story when I was about 8 years old. I remember me and my mom went on this short vacation to one of the beaches in Thailand. And I remember being so excited. But when we ended up going to the beaches, we found only plastic bags and colorful rubbish everywhere. And this, of course, really upset me. And I think it kind of hurt me in a way that made me want to do something about it. So for that whole day, me and my mom just started to collect trash. And at the end of the day, we couldn't pick up all of the trash that was on the beach. And we ended up going home and we ended up feeling really bad about it. And I remember feeling really horrible that these things were happening. So I remember trying to write a letter. And I wrote this letter directed to the Prime Minister of Thailand. And my mom ended up helping me write this letter, and she ended up sending it to the Prime Minister of Thailand. And after that, I think we got a reply back from one of his secretaries. And it said something like, "Oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. You're only a young girl, you have homework to do, don't worry." And this made me really want to change even more. So I think a couple weeks later, I created this presentation and I went to one of the big supermarkets in Thailand. It's called Central, and I went to talk to the offices there. And of course, tried to email them multiple times and talk to them. And of course, they didn't really reply because it was a kid calling them about a meeting. So as I kept on trying to email them and call them, and eventually I did get a meeting with one of the head owners of the supermarket and ended up presenting my idea of trying to ban single-use plastics in their retail stores and in their grocery stores, and to stop handing single-use plastic away to their customers. And as much as I tried, it took a little bit of convincing, but eventually, after a couple of years, they decided to ban single-use plastic bags once a day, every month for the whole year. And I think I just started from there, and I thought, maybe if I could convince these big companies to change, maybe I can convince Thailand to change. So I guess I started from there.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. What an inspiring story that we all should pay attention to of where we can start and where we can go. Thank you.
You have led sit-ins in front of Thai government buildings. You have been key in influencing major brands to stop using plastic. What do you think are some of the most effective ways you have influenced change? And why do you think so many young women are at the forefront of environmental activism?
I think the main reasons I got these major brands and the government to change is mainly by shaming them into change as well. Because the truth is, nobody wants to be seen as a bad guy. And of course, all these companies are doing something really bad for the world. And of course, everyone has a part to play in reducing the CO2 levels and reducing the amount of single-use plastics we create every year. And I think I just annoyed them to the point that I made them change. And of course, it's going to be a little bit harder to change society as well, because we have a social norm of using plastic and using single-use plastics. So as much as I've tried to shame the government and companies, I think it's going to be a little bit harder in the future when I try to change Thailand society as well. And I think the reason why so many young women are turning to environmental activism and any sort of activism is because the way that young girls have been brought up in the society as well. Because I remember being told as a young girl, well, younger, that girls mature faster than boys. And I think this was a way of mainly putting a little bit more of the responsibility onto young girls and basically forcing them to grow up a little bit faster. And by growing up a little bit faster, I think I managed to create and feel more emotions and feel more empathy towards the environment and felt some more responsibility in trying to change these things. And we can see this example in older siblings or older sisters taking care of their younger siblings as well. But I think the main reason why that young girls are more compelled to do these things is because they feel a little bit more responsibility in terms of helping the world. So, yeah.
I just have a follow-up question on that. How do you think that your work has been kind of inspiring more local brands and more local food producers and people who are, giving out single-use plastics on a daily basis? Do you think you've, is there a memory of like a time you had a conversation with like a food vendor and said, you should stop using plastics, and they actually did? Or is there another example of a more just a smaller example? Because I think it's wonderful that you're working with these like huge companies. I'm so impressed. Like I love the maturity and that takes a lot of courage. And I think that especially at a very, very young age, I'm just so impressed because I'm also young too. So, I mean, I think that going and emailing these larger brands for me is very intimidating. I'm wondering what you're saying about more local brands.
In Thailand, we have huge food in Thailand, there are so many food vendors on the street, and we are really known for our street food. So basically everywhere you go, there's some sort of person selling something. And I think one of the major changes that I've done is at this one market really close to my house. Sometimes me and my mom like to go there, me and my grandma. And I think my grandma actually asked this question since she knows a lot about what I do. And she told one of the older vendors. And since the older vendors don't really know about the environmental issues, I think this is really shocking to me. And my grandma asked the vendor, like, how do you feel about using paper instead of plastic? And how do you feel about telling your customers to use reusable bags instead of plastic? And the older vendor said, like, yes, I think that's a great idea, and that we should empower our young children and teach them about these things. And I think that was really empowering for me, in terms of now I know that everyone can change and everyone can get educated as well. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Lily, thanks so much. And really, it is deeply inspiring to hear your courage and your persistence and knocking down doors to convince people to change. Because the beginning might be, as you said, sort of shaming people or companies, but it's the start of actually ushering in a new normal. So hats off to you, really deeply inspiring. Anne, question for you. Your project has received special recognition with the Pathfinder Award, the World Travel and Tourism Council, the United Nations World Travel Organization, for its real innovation, which we heard a little bit about before, in bringing together conservation, sustainable development, and tourism. Can you talk about how you integrate education into the experience of the site, particularly for young people, and what you've seen, if there are any particular examples that you've seen of people who have come and had their eyes open to something brand new?
Right. So in Masumi, education is one of the key approaches that we have. It's actually protection, education, and sustainable development. And education for us has something to do with educating the local community about conservation work, engaging and involving them in that, and also, of course, engaging the visitors who come over. So if we're talking about the visitors of Masumi Geo Reserve, we have mostly millennial and young people come over and support the project. And at the same time, actually a lot of girls do come over to enjoy it. For Masumi, we've always said that the experience we need to offer inside should be one that will allow them to grow love for the place the way we love it. And that very short half-day experience should pack up many of the realizations we've had through the years in a short amount of time, so that people could understand conservation a bit better, a little bit more. And the way I frame it to our park rangers is that we need to change three things, or make sure of three things as visitors go inside, especially since the trail is about 4 to 5 hours long. And if you think of it, that's almost similar to a week long of teaching inside a school, right? Or inside the classroom. And, you know, to not be able to pack up educational content into such an experience would be quite a waste of time. Because we are people on the ground who see what things are like for environmentally destructive activities and things like this, you know, things that people usually do not see. It's of course our mandate and our responsibility to be an ambassador for nature and give it a voice, since it can't talk for itself. So the three things that I ask our park rangers to be able to do is to impart new knowledge, cause a change in behavior, and grow fondness for the place. For me, it's important there's new knowledge so that people could understand how the landscape interconnects with the life that exists on it and how people interact with the landscape. So as people go through the trail and a lot of the rope courses and all of these fun things inside, our park rangers would tell them about the air plants, the very unique air plants that you find living on the rocks, or say the small animals with long tails and sharp claws that are running all over the rocks. So all of these things that are somewhat fun to listen to, but really give you a deeper understanding of how biodiversity interacts in a given location. Sometimes we also go as far as, you know, integrating a greater depth of understanding of Philippine culture and its interaction with nature. by exploring, say, how indigenous people make use of plants for medicine, or how certain myths and legends really root from an understanding of how nature behaves. So a very simple example of that would be, say, in Philippine culture, it's generally, an example of it would be in the Philippine culture, it's a myth that if a butterfly comes to you, it means that a loved one has died. The scientific explanation for that is simply that butterflies are attracted to the salt in your tears. So when someone dies and you cry a lot, then butterflies are more likely to come over. So all of these simple things that give them an aha moment and make them more curious about the life around them and of nature and its interactions. New behavior and practice is just simply about having people get a glimpse of what harmonious man-nature interaction can look like. Because we have a geotourism destination, then we also have that opportunity to show people how they could interact sustainably with nature. So it could be something very simple, right? Like, say, making sure that everything you bring in, you bring out with you. That's not very difficult to do. And if you can do it in 5 hours, then it makes people have less barriers to changing how they behave, even outside of Missouri. It could be something as simple as controlling their noise through more sensitive locations inside the trail. And they realize then that, there are new ways of exploring places. Fun isn't just all about talking to the people I'm with continuously as we walk through the trail. It could also mean being quiet, standing still, and listening to the sounds of nature around me. And there's also a different kind of fun that comes with that. Developing fond memories of the place or love for the place, we believe through our experience is most effective when we make it personal and we tell stories of our personal experiences. I think that's the most powerful of all storytelling and all knowledge sharing that you can give. When we ask guests what's the most memorable time that they have inside the trail, they often will say or will remember the stories of the park rangers, how they were turned from being illegal loggers to stewards of the environment, how destruction of the environment has brought havoc and damage to their families. Those are the stories that stick, that actually causes a change in behavior and causes them to reevaluate the choices as well. It also makes a difference that the experience engages the senses and is quite emotional in a sense. So when you climb up a 130-meter hammock hanging on top of the forest canopy, that's very exhilarating. It doesn't just engage their ears or their minds, right? This how do I put it? The thrill that comes with it makes them very receptive to a lot of information sharing that we're doing. A 10-minute solemn walk through a very dense, thick forest makes them experience many other things too, makes them think many other things. And the last is that the more shared it is, the more receptive they also become, because it's an experience that they get to share with their loved ones and friends and the people that they're walking with. They associate memories of spending time with their loved ones with the place, and it causes them to love it even more. I hope I am making sense. But in the 4 years,
not only making sense, but you're making a very good pitch for for coming. It sounds quite extraordinary on so many levels, and so important. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, they sound very simple, but these are actually really the things that I believe makes a difference in really causing people to love the place even more. The point of it all for us really is just to regain people's empathy towards the environment and having them regain their connection with nature. I think a lot of the problems that we have today really roots from the apathy and the disconnect of people with the environment that they exist in, and to give them an opportunity to get that connection back, even just for 4 hours or 5 hours, helps them regain what was lost. So all of this we really try to support with a lot of learning and development activities. We actually have one point person just focused on research and training, and all of our area managers who do the triple work of maintaining, patrolling, education, and development. They're actually all teachers. They're all comfortable teaching and educating the rangers who report to them, because you really have to be patient if you're an educator. And education really is the way to, change mindset and change how things are done.
Well, thank you so much, and it's a perfect segue to my question for you, Christina. You have spent a great deal of your career building the evidence for the broad social benefits of educating girls and the most successful and effective solutions to ensuring that girls don't have just access to education, but what is a quality education and what works in girls' education. And your recent research, as you mentioned earlier, has been on the direct connection between educating girls and addressing climate change and its effects. Can you share with us some of the most promising evidence around this link between girls' education and climate change, as well as perhaps some of the areas where you see gaps in the data?
Yeah, no, I think this is as you said, a really great segue. I think what Anne was pointing out was what the literature around transformative learning has really shown us is an important aspect of the learning experience, right? If we want to think about education as having that transformative potential, we really have to dig deep into thinking about how do you create these kinds of experiential learning opportunities that get beyond sort of like the knowledge of climate change or the knowledge of environmental issues, and really gets at that personal worldview and really changes minds that then change behaviors, because you can't start with the behaviors to then change the minds, right? So I think Anne's point around that transformative learning is really where a lot of the promising evidence is. So I think for my remarks here, I'd like to start by saying that there is an important distinction to make when it comes to actually talking about the evidence around girls' education and climate change. There's the promising evidence, as I just mentioned in connection with Anne's point, and then there's the compelling evidence. And I think the compelling evidence has typically focused on carbon. The idea that achieving universal secondary education for girls tomorrow would mean that we could be approximately 1.5 billion fewer people on the planet by 2050, right? This is compelling because most of our discussions around climate change are focused on carbon emissions. And what is the primary source of the imbalance of carbon today? People. And so if we were to slow population growth to a rate that was more sustainable for the Earth's carrying capacity, we could prevent 85 gigatons of carbon being released into the atmosphere by 2050. So the number one way of doing this, at least according to the models, is by investing in girls' education and family planning. However, there are problems with this model. First, it doesn't take into account that we are currently the most educated the Earth has ever seen. Yet look at what that has led in terms of our levels of consumption, our infatuation with economic growth, and our present climate emergency. So more of the same kind of education that our education systems are delivering does not guarantee better outcomes for the planet. Second, focusing on the number of emitters on the planet distracts us from paying attention to our patterns of emission. Sorry, my daughter just entered the room. So focusing on the number of emitters distracts us from thinking about the patterns of emission, right? Which is something that I won't go into right now because it gets into a whole other set of data and evidence. But the third point too on the problems of this particular model is that this model leads us down the slippery slope of population control and racist eugenics, as it places the onus of change on the wombs of Black and brown women in the global South. So to get us out of this focus, we need to understand that the relationship between girls' education and climate change is more than about fertility. And then on top of that, we have to realize that access to education and family planning is a girl's right, and that we shouldn't all be jumping into investing in girls' education for its impact on climate change because of its impact on decreasing the total population size. So to do that, how do we get out of this focus? We need to understand that the climate crisis is not just about carbon, but it's also about climate justice and gender justice. So while carbon and other greenhouse gases are certainly the proximal causes of the climate crisis, the underlying root causes are the same root causes of gender inequality. So that's the values that drive the domination over and the exploitation of the natural world, which are the same values that drive the oppression, the exploitation, and the violence against vulnerable groups, including girls and women. So we cannot achieve climate justice without gender justice. So if we want to talk about compelling evidence, we need to understand that unequal power relations is just as destructive to life on this planet as an imbalance of greenhouse gases. And that's where I think the promising evidence around what is quality gender transformative education and what can that do to increase both girls and boys' adaptive capacities, transformative capacities, and their skills to really address the climate crisis. And that's where some of the promising evidence around girls' green skills and girls' climate leadership. So as we're seeing with Anne and Lily, just as classic examples of what can happen if we really empower girls through a quality education. So I think, if we want to talk about that evidence, I think we have to really distinguish, what do we know right now and what do we need more evidence around?
Thank you so much. And where do you think we need more evidence? If you were to look into your crystal ball and say, oh, if we could build the evidence about this and this, it will get us much farther to understanding the solutions and potentially also to persuading and convincing that investing in this kind of transformative education for both girls and boys is of critical and urgent importance.
Yeah, so there's two areas that I think specifically. The first one is around skills in particular. So we know that the knowledge about climate change and knowledge about environmental issues does not necessarily translate into more pro-environmental behaviors. But we do know that the affective dimension, the psychosocial, the psycho-emotional aspects, and the skills are all equally important when we put them together into what we might call sustainability competencies. And so what we don't understand is, how sticky are these? So once we are to develop them through, a transformative educational experience, how long do they last? How often do you need to sort of dose these sorts of interventions? And really what counts as that transformative experience? I think what Anne was pointing out is brilliant, but how likely is it to have everyone on this planet to have something as equally brilliant as that, right? So we need to better understand, how do you create quality climate change education, for example, and that's gender transformative. And the second area is around leadership. So we have really compelling evidence around the impact that women's political participation and women's political empowerment has on pro-environmental outcomes. So we know that when you have more representation by women in parliaments, for example, that those countries are more likely to have designated conservation areas, they're more likely to pass environmental treaties. Countries with higher rates of women's political participation also have lower carbon footprints. But what we don't really know very well is the connection between girls' education and that political empowerment and political participation. We know that, intuitively, we know that it's a formative experience to have, but we don't exactly know why. And we don't know how to, recreate that at scale, right? We understand that formal education provides girls and women social networks in addition to the knowledge and the skills and the attitudes. But we know that social networks and opportunities are critical. But then how do we, recreate this for all girls and women on this planet? So I think there are some definite evidence areas that we could use more research around. And I hope that others will get into that. And I definitely will continue to pursue that as well on my own.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And what you're saying is also deeply connected to some of Girl Rising's other work, which is working with local organizations and trying to bring about gender transformative education for both adolescent girls and boys around the world. So lots to think about from what you've said. Thank you. So I think we're here on our final round of questions. Pia?
Okay. So we know from the current healthcare crisis and from past crises that girls are disproportionately affected, as Christina has mentioned, and all of you, I think, have just brought light to. On the International Day of the Girl, what are some of the actions you hope to see from political leaders, business leaders, the scientific community, individuals, and just the greater community of this planet Earth? And I hope that you can bring that call to action specifically to environmental degradation, like how we can combat it, and how we can also use education to do that. I think that all of you have touched a little bit on that already, but maybe one specific thing would be amazing.
And I think we'll start with Anne.
Okay. Well, you gave 1 minute. I was still trying to figure out what I'm going to be talking about. But there are lots of requests from my end when it comes to what everyone can do to combat environmental degradation. Starting with educational systems, I hope that we can have really, the kind of education that doesn't just teach science, but teaches the conscience and the meaning behind all of these things that we do. It's not something that is just theory and science, and we know that somehow, right? And I don't have this academics to talk about it right now, but it has to be both. Definitely has to be both, including the values that are associated with it. For businesses, I hope that they take the opportunity, they take on the call to go into communities, to go into rural development, and see to it that the businesses they start not just look into how much wealth is generated, but how well that is also shared among people. Businesses should have a deeper understanding of the areas and spaces that they move in. I think that's a big starting point when it comes to really understanding the environment and the habitats that you belong to. I'm not going to go into details, but that's something that we learned as we work particularly for the Masungi landscape, and that just businesses go past laws and just try to contribute to social justice. It's irresponsible not to do so, considering all of the studies that we know right now and the information that's available to us at the touch of a button. We know that government might have a difficult time implementing and passing laws. We don't need to wait for laws to take action. For this political leaders that we have, just the same thing, that we adopt a long-term holistic perspective of progress. We need to be looking at people's quality of life. I think this is something very natural for girls and women, as opposed to just how much gross domestic product we're producing as countries. I hope that government begins to empower and guide others in participating in the conservation mission. We know that we've reached success in environmentalism and conservation when we have ordinary people participating in it every day, when people are in green jobs, when people have reached that point of sustainability in whatever sphere they are moving in. And this is definitely not just something for government and scientists to do if we're to reach the 2030 goals and really save this world from climate degradation. The more people, the sooner, the better. And that means across gender, across industries, across locations. And I guess I want to end with that for all women. My expectation is that we just all continue supporting and collaborating in making all of these happen. A lot of the people that have, led me to this serendipitous point in my life to contribute in conservation really comes from getting empowered by different people, different women in different areas. And I hope we all continue doing that, because it's really just by working together that we will, push things forward.
Thank you, Anne. Christina, what about you in a final close? What do you hope to see in the next year? What kind of actions?
I definitely agree with Anne's points about education systems developing what I call a feminist planetary consciousness, and that we shouldn't see that as being a bad thing. I guess for me, first, I would urge every signatory to the Paris Agreement to include an item on girls' and boys' access to quality gender transformative education for climate action in their nationally determined contributions. The NDCs are instrumental in signaling priorities to downstream policies, strategies, and implementation plans and budgets. So we can't support girls' education without this enabling environment. So to get ministries of environment to work hand in hand with ministries of education, ministries of gender, ministries of labor, ministries of finance to lay out a new green learning agenda that is gender transformative is absolutely key. I think in terms of business leaders, there is evidence that shows that more diverse leadership in business is better for not only the bottom line, but for the planet and for the long-term sustainability of their organizations and their companies. So definitely to see more businesses make gender equality a #1 priority within their organizations and companies. And then the third thing is that I would urge the scientific community to increase the longitudinal evidence of the impact of quality gender transformative education for climate action on both girls' empowerment and as well as girls and boys' climate empowerment. So those are my closing thoughts.
Fantastic, thank you. And Lily, over to you. What are the actions you're hoping to see from these different sectors of society over the next year?
There are multiple things that we can do to empower young girls in order to create a better world for all. And I think the things that we can do in terms of the government is that the government can try to tell schools and enforce schools to advertise and basically teach their students about gender equality and teach their students about how to be world leaders in the future. And not only about maths and science, and not only about how climate change happens and what is happening currently, but also how they can fix this and how they can change their mindsets and how they can become better people as well. And in businesses, I definitely agree that we need more diversity because when we have diversity, we get more ideas, more opinions. And not only that, but we will end up with better results as well. And I think scientifically, we should basically give out more evidence that this needs to be fixed and this needs to be solved. And just scientists need to basically urge everyone to change using their evidence and facts. And basically what I'm trying to say is that everybody needs to become more open-minded and change their mindsets about everything. Therefore, we can create new leaders for our world and create a better economy and society.
Well said, Lily. Thank you so much. Well, thank you all so much for being with us today, for your time, for your work. Everybody's organization, a link to the organization is in our chat. So please, I urge everybody who's listening to find out more about the work of each of these amazing individuals. Enormous thanks to you. We at Girl Rising hope to be talking more about our climate change and girls education project in the coming months. And thank you so much. What an inspiring conversation. Thank you all.
The future is changing. Where there is will, there is hope.
Empower more women, empower more girls. We will start creating this momentum that is undeniable.
When I first read the research about the link between girls' education and climate change, I was surprised. And then it made all the sense in the world. The mission of Girl Rising is to change the way the world values girls and their education.
There's no way you can solve climate change without educating girls. Land usage, food production, and population growth. These three simple solutions require girls' education at the center.
I decided to go house by house to teach their children. That's my story.
Did you see that one?
Yes, yes.
I love her.
I was in Madrid last year. It felt like the advocacy impact, and particularly the youth advocacy, was getting heard. People who have to live with the consequences of climate change are now taking the lead on advocating for change, and I think that's powerful, and it's something that's very, very difficult to ignore. So much attention has been focused on the pandemic since February or March. That doesn't mean that the changes in the climate stopped.
In India, there are a number of different issues that are impacting us when it comes to climate change. There are floods, there are droughts. Our job is to really find stories of change from the ground.
We started our first NGO to make our island home of Bali plastic bag free.
And elevate it to a point that it can be told to a lot of people across the world.
My story, the HP Girl Rising Storytelling Challenge, is a citizen storytelling initiative, a global call for stories for us to hear and amplify stories of real people around the world.
Hi, I'm Fitz, and I'm Faithfulness.
मेरा नाम खुशबू है. My name is Adela.
HP has been one of our partners for the last 5 years, giving us critical support as we have expanded our work in new countries.
If you look at every sort of big social issues in every generation, young people have always been in the front of it. And right now, the issue of our time is climate change.
We will not stand by.
What inspires me about the next generation of women and the girls that I talk to all the time is their drive, their courageousness. They are not going to back down.
Peace, y'all. My name is Ruby Yabara, and I am a girl rising. Island woman, rise, walang makakatigil. Brown, brown woman, rise, alamin ng iyong ugat. They got nothing on us, ay. Nothing on us, ay. Nothing on us, ay. Nothing on us. Island woman, rise, walang makakatigil. Brown, brown woman, rise, alamin ng iyong ugat. They got nothing on us. Nothing on us. Nothing on us. Yo, fuck a story arc if it don't involve the matriarch. Some mothers work from the ground up, they craft in air like ATR with the butterfly sleeves. Naka-Philippine na pag nasalita, magaba na tayo bala. Huwag magtaka kung ako ay makatabulok na sistema ko. Rakot sa pera, bagsak while we put in our heart into darkness. They put in these pigs in the office. You thinking you schooling, but you hella lost cause you best see the boss while I top this. But look at my ate, she moving so cold. Canada, her when she glow. Flick at the wrist with the ilo she hold. When I go sa ilo, she dripping in gold. Island woman, rise, walang makakatigil. Brown, brown woman, rise, alamin ng iyong ugat. They got nothing on us, ay. Nothing on us, ay. Nothing on us, ay. Nothing on us. Island woman, rise, walang makakatigil. Brown, brown woman, rise, alamin ng iyong ugat. They got nothing on us. Nothing on us. Nothing on us. Abaniko sa kamay at isang mikropono sabay. Arang tapang pogi ng inay at halimaw nang sumasabay. Mga bara nyo lahat sablay, mga rappers na puro bangkay. Tinamaan ko lahat patay, kaya walang mag-iingay. I got that Filipino phenotype, kayo mag-i-mestizo white. But give me that moreno like, that Rufio Aquino type. My lolas they be speaking like those Bali songs on bolo night. I breathe the ether, Nino hype. Two tongues are sharper with the mic. I Nino in my history like from a narrow readers weaved in tight. They thieve and sell one piece of might. Just turn a C-note light. Hacienda like Aquino, right? Rodrigo Vigilante type. They kill my titos left and right. When terror law just fills the night. Island woman, rise, walang makakatigil. Brown, brown woman, rise, alamin ng iyong ugat. They got nothing on us, ay. Nothing on us, ay. Nothing on us, ay. Nothing on us. Island woman, rise, walang makakatigil. Brown, brown woman, rise, alamin ng iyong ugat. They got nothing on us. Nothing on us. Nothing on us. Isang bagsak.
Hi Girl Rising. I am Gresa, I am a CIE alumni, and I co-founded Keep It Green organization. I come from the small but beautiful country of Kosovo, which is located in the southeastern Europe. Unfortunately, even though small and beautiful, my country faces a lot of environmental problems. We are the home to 2 large coal-firing power plants that produce 97% of my country's electricity and leave behind hazardous levels of pollution. Many of my friends live within yards of these power plants and face the consequences of pollution. While right now most of the world is keeping face masks as a protection against coronavirus, in Kosovo we have had to keep face masks for most of the days during the winter, because that is when smog and the pollution reaches its peak. My role via Keep It Green is to organize the community to raise their voice for environmental laws and social responsibility that puts Kosovo's environmental problems in the country's agenda. The tool which we use to achieve our objectives is the education and empowerment of youth to become environmental activists, thus constantly multiplying activists and organizers. So far, Keep It Green has initiated multiple projects, including solar camps, activism schools, advocacy campaigns, and artistic projects. We actually helped to pass one of the most important environmental laws in Kosovo. Me and my team were in the forefront of peaceful strikes and public pressure to pass a law that defines the power plant area as an environmentally hazardous one. That was a big step forward. Over the last 4 years, the organization counts over 500 trained youth coming from all around Kosovo. I have personally met with each of them. I have witnessed them learn, get inspired, and then go back to their own small communities and make change. Now, the region where I live, it's still a developing region, where people face a lot of economic difficulties, lack of opportunities to advance, and a sort of isolation due to the visa regime which we have with, well, almost every country in the world. It's also a patriarchal region, where it's still pretty unusual for a girl to lead, to strike, to have a voice for her own and for the others. But where there is will, there is hope. I know that it often takes lots of sacrifices and a tremendous amount of dedication to be able to reach your goals. But we must know that we do not walk alone. What I am doing in Kosovo, you are doing in the United States, and you are doing in Brazil, and you are doing in India, and wherever you are. We often face the same challenges, and we overcome them by using the same methods. So we are not just individuals, we are a support group. We walk together. I am Gresa. I am a CIE changemaker, and just like you, I am Girl Rising.
Everyone is different. Each child have their own unique identity. Most people are aware of this, right? Yet only a few actually take action to help others strengthen their unique qualities. One of those individuals are teacher Giraffe, who is the founder of Saturday School. He wants to enable the youth to explore their interest through learning by doing, and to gain the courage to pursue their dream, regardless of what they are. Saturday School is a space for true learning. I so believe that. Even in the difficult times, Saturday School continue to explore ways to ensure the students continue to work on moving toward their dreams. During the COVID-19 lockdown, we created the Saturday Hub, which is a Facebook group where the students are able to learn English, singing, dancing, photographing, and more. All these are remaining at home. So here's the question. What would you like to do in the Saturday morning? Thank you.
In Vietnam, females account for half of the population. It's obvious that investing in girls and their education means investing in the nation's development and equality. Moreover, women are people who make homes. Thus, if we need to have good homes, we need to train the builders well. In this regard, over the past 10 years, I and my colleagues in Vietnam and the United States in the scholarship organization called Women's Empowerment and Voice, or WIV in short, have worked together to financially support approximately 2,000 girls in the Mekong Delta in the south of Vietnam. It's really hard for me to tell a successful or outstanding story of a girl who inspired me, because all the girls whom we financially supported over the past 10 years have given me remarkable inspiration. Each of them represents an impressive story for their school and community. Yet all of them share a variety of things in common, such as living in poor or low-income farmer families, growing up in hardships, parents being seriously sick, primarily because of hard work and malnutrition for years, having to do one or more part-time jobs in parallel with their learning in order to financially support themselves, their study, and their families. and being the first person in their family going to college in financial difficulties. Their story has strongly inspired me to work endlessly for them and their future, since I completely understand that this girl will play a key role in their families, becoming well-educated daughters, sisters, and mothers who will live a better life than their parents, become financially independent, and will in turn educate their younger siblings and children to be good citizens for society. I'm Girl Rising.
Thank you so much, Nawinda Somsawat, for that inspiring story about Saturday School Foundation, and to Dr. Langdang for highlighting the impact that can ripple forward from making sure girls get the education that they deserve. Now we have two very special guests joining us. Mardewi, Girl Rising Country Program Manager in Indonesia, will be here on the main stage for the Meet the Changemaker session with Leanne Nirmala, a facilitator and mentor with WASH and the Menstrual Hygiene Management Program, for a discussion in Bahasa with English subtitles.
And in our first breakout session, my fellow task force member Ash Goldstein is meeting with Kamita Naidu, a human rights lawyer who specializes in climate justice and women's rights at the Asia Pacific Forum of Women Law and Development based in Thailand. To join this breakout session, in the top left corner of your screen, click Schedule, and you will see a drop-down menu that allows you to choose the breakout session. Or you're welcome to stay on the main stage with us, and we'll be back, of course, at the top of the hour for South Asia portion of the summit, led by Girl Rising's India team.
Selamat pagi, Bu Lia. Terima kasih sebelumnya karena sudah bersedia untuk saya ajak berdiskusi. Sesi kali ini berjudul Meet the Changemaker. Hari ini kita akan berbincang-bincang terkait dengan pekerjaan Ibu Lia sebagai fasilitator manajemen kebersihan menstruasi yang saya dengar dan saya sudah dapat beberapa informasinya sangat menarik. Jadi nanti kita akan banyak berbincang tentang hal tersebut. Sebelumnya saya perkenalkan diri, saya Mardewi, saya adalah Girl Rising Explore More Program Manager untuk Indonesia. Saya yang akan memandu untuk bincang-bincang ini. Kita bisa mulai ya, Bu ya? Oke, ya. Nah, pertama Ibu mungkin bisa ceritakan tentang pekerjaan Ibu atau peran Ibu sebagai mentor ya, Bu ya, kita bilangnya ya, sebagai mentor MKM di tempat Ibu.
Oke, selamat pagi ya Mbak Mardewi, saya jawab dulu sapaannya. Baik, perkenalkan Mbak Mardewi, saya Lian Nurmala. Saat ini saya menjadi kepala sekolah di salah satu sekolah di Kabupaten Tangerang, yaitu di SDN Cipugel 1, dan juga saya merupakan salah satu mentor dari program MKM, Manajemen Kebersihan Menstruasi, yang berada di bawah naungan Dinas Pendidikan, juga UNICEF Indonesia, ya, di mana saya di sini mementori dan mendampingi sekolah-sekolah yang sudah ditunjuk oleh pihak kabupaten yang berjumlah 40 sekolah, Mbak Mardewi ya, 40 sekolah, di mana sekolah yang saya mentori itu ada 5 sekolah. Nah, di 5 sekolah itu terdiri dari sekolah-sekolah menengah yang terdiri atas 4 sekolah negeri, sekolah pertama negeri, dan sekolah madrasah sanawiyah negeri, yaitu SMP 1 Mau, SMPN 1 Jaya, SMPN 1 Pasar Kemis, SMPN 2 Pasar Kemis, dan 1 MTSN 1 Kabupaten Tangerang. Di mana di sini memang saya bertugas sebagai mentor itu mendampingi para sekolah-sekolah ini yang awalnya mungkin kita tahu ya kalau namanya kok manajemen kebersihan menstruasi, yang awalnya menjadi tabu gitu ya Mbak Mardewi ya untuk dibicarakan. Tetapi di sinilah saya sebagai mentor, kami sebagai mentor mendampingi mereka, mementori sekolah-sekolah tersebut untuk lebih jauh mengetahui dan memahami apa sih yang disebut dengan manajemen kebersihan menstruasi itu sendiri, Mbak Mardewi.
Yang dimaksud dengan mementori sekolah itu seperti apa, Bu? Apa misalkan gitu ya, melatih guru-guru atau mendampingi para siswa atau seperti apa, Bu, yang dimaksud dengan mendampingi sekolah?
Oh iya. Jadi kami para mentor sebelumnya itu ada pelatihan atau pelatih yang diadakan oleh UNICEF Indonesia bekerja sama dengan Speak Indonesia, di mana kami sebagai mentor itu diberikan pelatihan tentang pengetahuan lebih dalam tentang manajemen kebersihan menstruasi. Nah, di mana setelah itu sekolah-sekolah diundang juga untuk dimentori oleh kami. Jadi secara berkelanjutan atau berkesinambungan, kami dilatih, lalu kami melatih, dan setelah itu kami mendampingi guru itu kan disebut guru pendamping. Guru pendamping di sekolah masing-masing kami dampingi, lalu guru tersebut yang menyampaikan kepada para siswi di sekolah, di mana kami sebagai mentor harus siap ketika ibaratnya kami diberitahukan, Bu, kami akan mengkampanyekan atau kami akan memberikan pelatihan kepada siswa, apakah Ibu bersedia atau tidak. Ya, waktu itu kan belum pandemi ya, jadi kami masih ada untuk mendatangi sekolah-sekolah. Tapi dengan catatan memang bukan hanya kepada siswanya, jadi kepada gurunya terlebih dahulu semuanya, nanti guru yang menyalurkan kembali kepada siswa-siswanya. Seperti itu, Mbak Martin.
Kan Ibu tadi menyebutkan kalau Ibu juga sebenarnya fungsi utamanya atau pekerjaan utamanya kan sebagai kepala sekolah ya. Nah, itu bagaimana, Bu? Kenapa kok Ibu masih tetap mau menjadi mentor gitu ya? Karena kan pasti selain fokus kepada tugas sehari-hari juga harus tadi mendampingi guru-guru dan sekolah-sekolah yang menjadi tanggung jawab Ibu gitu. 5 lagi kan gitu loh. Dan kayaknya tersebar juga kan ke tempatnya ya. Jadi itu gimana tuh, Bu? Kenapa sih mau?
Ya, memang walaupun sekarang kita ketahui ya tugas sebagai kepala sekolah itu bukan sedikit gitu ya. Tetapi yang menjadikan inspirasi saya adalah berawal dari adanya isu MKM yang terkait dengan isu gender, di mana ibaratnya katanya menstruasi itu tabu untuk dibicarakan, menstruasi itu hanya untuk perempuan saja, menstruasi itu adalah hal yang ibaratnya katanya tidak lazim untuk dibicarakan. Tetapi di sini dengan adanya program MKM ini, kami sebagai mentor memberikan pengetahuan agar mereka lebih memahami bahwa ini bukan hanya untuk perempuan saja, di mana manajemen kebersihan menstruasi ini sangat penting diketahui oleh para pria juga gitu kan. Para laki-laki juga ibaratnya kan, tidak hanya sebagai perempuan, di mana tidak ada lagi oh iya yang mens itu kan perempuan, ya udah perempuan aja gitu. Tapi di sini tidak, di mana kami memberikan pengetahuan kepada siswa-siswanya juga, selain kepada siswi bagaimana untuk menghargai, bagaimana cara untuk menghadapi para perempuan yang sedang menstruasi gitu kan. Jadi mereka pun akhirnya menyadari dengan adanya kecakapan hidup, yang salah satunya adalah bisa saling menghargai, seperti itu, Mbak Mardewi.
Sekali itu isu yang penting ya, Bu ya, benar sekali yang tadi Ibu katakan bahwa kalau kita bicara tentang menstruasi, itu urusan perempuan gitu kan, itu laki-laki mah nggak boleh tahu, atau yang ada malah apaan sih kok laki-laki perlu bicara tentang menstruasi, kan itu sesuatu yang tanda kutip tabu gitu ya. Oke, nah Ibu sudah berapa lama jadi mentor MKM ini?
Di sini kami memulainya di 2019, di mana 2018 itu kami baru diundang. Diundang untuk diberitahu bahwa kami mendampingi sekolah-sekolah yang harus kita mentori di program MKM ini. Dan perlu Mbak Mardewi ketahui bahwa program MKM ini merupakan kelanjutan dari program Kurasaki. Nah, Kurasaki itu kurangi sampah sekolah kita, di mana di bawahnya itu ada program Sanitsek atau sanitasi sekolah, di mana untuk sanitasi sekolah di Kabupaten Tangerang itu menjadi pionir. Jadi pionir di negara-negara di ibaratnya di wilayah lain yang dijadikan contoh. Nah, jadi secara berjenjang Mbak Mardewi,
Jadi
sanitasi,
sebenarnya
kurasi dan
kaitannya program MKM ini juga sangat terkait erat dengan program sanitasi ya Bu ya, sanitasi dan kebersihan diri atau kebersihan personal ya. Jadi tidak bisa berdiri sendiri. Nah, kurang lebih ya 1,5 tahun ya Bu ya programnya sudah berjalan gitu. Apa saja sih yang apa saja hal-hal yang membuat Ibu bangga gitu ya, baik sebagai mentor dan juga sebagai salah satu, sebenarnya juga karena Ibu sebagai kepala sekolah kan sebenarnya juga salah satu stakeholder utama di dalam bidang pendidikan gitu ya.
Yang membuat saya bangga adalah ternyata banyak sekali yang ingin mengetahui tentang program MKM ini, ya. Dan bukan hanya perempuan saja, tetapi laki-laki pun tertarik, ibaratnya siswa dan siswi gitu kan. Kebanyakan kan selama ini hanya siswinya saja, tetapi di sini para siswa pun laki-laki pun tertarik untuk mempelajari ini dan memahaminya. Bahkan guru-guru pendampingnya pun Mbak Mardewi itu bukan hanya perempuan saja, ada juga guru pendamping yang laki-laki yang awalnya gini, kok saya juga bingung deh Bu, kenapa saya dilibatkan, saya kan laki-laki, saya tidak menstruasi. Jangan salah dulu, di sini kita tidak hanya mempelajari tentang menstruasi, tapi manajemen kebersihan menstruasi, dan ini harus diketahui ada laki-laki juga, bukan hanya sebagai perempuan saja. Makanya udah kita piskan isu gender itu ya. Jadi sekarang maupun laki-laki maupun perempuan, ayo kita untuk melakukan perubahan.
Thank you so much, Mardewi and Leah, for outlining the importance of female hygiene education for both girls and boys, and to Ash and Kavita in the breakout room as well. We're coming to the end of the Southeast Asia session now. Thank you all for your wonderful messages and for posting so many photos of yourself with the hashtag Rising Together. This has been a really interesting 2 hours.
And thank you, Arya and Ash, and all of our Young Leaders Task Force members for creating this event, for standing up for girls, their education, and their futures. In closing the first session of our summit, I want to underscore that there has been tremendous progress in girls' education over the last 2 decades. Prior to COVID, in most countries in the world, girls and boys were in primary school in equal numbers. And during that time, there's also been widespread and growing recognition that educating girls has enormous benefits to individuals, families, communities, and nations. But that progress is now in serious risk of being eroded. Today, millions of girls are not in school due to COVID-19 lockdowns. And with schools closed, girls are much less likely to have access to technology that would allow them to stay connected to school. And girls shoulder an undue burden of domestic and care work at home as families are struggling to survive. We're seeing in many communities upticks in violence against girls, early marriage, and teen pregnancy. The Malala Fund recently estimated that some 20 million adolescent girls who were in school last March are at risk of never returning to the classroom. Girl Rising is determined to do everything we can to make sure girls are supported during this time and that progress is not eroded. The girls of today are needed. We need their ideas, their talents, their problem solving. We know that there are girls who will change their communities and the world, girls who could be the next vice president and president, and girls who will help confront the very real threats posed by climate change. So we're asking you today to support our Rising Together fundraising campaign, which helps keep girls close to learning and provides for their needs. You can give to Rising Together by using our QR code or through our website address posted here.
Your donations make our work possible. Every gift makes a difference in creating a future where all girls can thrive with vast possibilities. So thank you to all of you, fierce girl champions, for joining us, and to Arya and the Young Leaders Task Force for making this event possible.
Thanks, Thanita. We hope you'll stay with us for more sessions because we have so many more activities lined up for you. We'll now have a brief video interlude, then jump right into session 2, which will be led by Girl Rising's India team. In this upcoming session, we will meet Roxana herself. We'll also hear a discussion from our program partners in Pakistan and dive deep into how the digital divide disproportionately affects girls. Thank you so much again for joining our kickoff session.